Let's talk about the president's anger as evinced in the speech Wednesday night. Let's watch a little bit about what he claimed he has done so far.
I've restored American strength, settled 8 wars in 10 months, destroyed the Iran nuclear threat, and ended the war in Gaza, bringing for the first time in 3,000 years peace to the Middle East. I negotiated directly with the drug companies and foreign nations to slash prices on drugs and pharmaceuticals by as much as 400, 500, and even 600%. Gasoline is now under $2.50 a gallon in much of the country. In some states, it, by the way, just hit $1.99 a gallon.
Frank,
things are going so damn well. He's pissed about it.
Yeah. Let's look at these claims, and we go through them one by one. I was struck, maybe because of my previous career as a Middle East correspondent, by the claim that he has brought peace to the Middle East, also for the first time in 3,000 years.
3,000.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
That's a long time.
Yeah. I'm old enough to remember the 1990s.
Well, old enough to remember Syria.
Yeah.
But there, I don't even know what to ask you on that. I mean, when people hear him say that he's brought peace to the Middle East for the first time in 3,000 years, even inside the White House, even inside the national security apparatus, what do you think they think?
That he's delusional.
Okay.
I mean, it's really there's no credible way you can make an assertion like that. And that's kind of the basis of not just his claims there, but so many of the other claims that he was making in the speech. And that's why it's hard to imagine that they consider this to be their most successful sales strategy. That, there's only so much you can do to convince people of things where there are material realities that they're experiencing that just are at odds with what he's claiming.
Right. That's the affordability issues. So stay on the Middle East and the foreign policy issue for 1 second, because rather specifically, there's a very tentative ceasefire in Gaza that could break it any day. So at what point does the Republican Party and Republicans in Congress, let's say, you know what, you didn't actually bring peace to the Middle East. You didn't actually do all this. The 8 wars that he's negotiated, one of them, Cambodia, Thailand war, that just got hot again last week.
Congo, M23, they're still fighting
They're still fighting.
Yeah. And that peace in the Middle East, it requires him to nurture a process and to make difficult decisions where he throws the prestige and weight of the presidency behind some pretty big asks he's going to have to make of both the Israelis and of our Arab allies. And if he's acting as if it's a foregone conclusion and everything is settled, it's evidence of a guy who's actually not really truly committed to the process.
I guess I'm just having a hard time this week, harder than other weeks, in using my eyeballs to look at reality and then listening to what he's claiming is reality. The gap is pretty wide this week.
I mean, I think what you're seeing is the culmination of a couple of things. One, he's always had the tendency to exaggerate, extremely exaggerate, say things that aren't true, all of that.
And by the way, politicians do that.
Politicians do that. I mean, he's the
that.
best and the greatest at doing that. He's the greatest exaggerator we have ever seen in all of time.
He's the most humble man in history. No one is more humble than he is.
But the true sense that he feels entirely empowered, feels there are no limitations. There is nobody around him that will effort to try to get him to, wait a minute, maybe we should move in this direction or not say that. I mean, the glaring example for me of that trend was right after that speech, seeing Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, explain why he was actually accurate when he said drug prices have come down by as much as 600%.
600%.
Yeah, this is a cabinet secretary saying, yes, no, this is why it's, why what he's saying.
A guy who's ostensibly good at math.
I mean, hopefully. I mean, these.
Well, he's got to be.
Yeah.
No, I'm just not. This is a hard week to sort of track, where the rhetoric is and where reality is. Harder than most of these weeks. I want to stay on this general subject, but let's go to the speech itself. What was the rationale for doing the speech?
The rationale is he's taken a lot of heat for the state of the economy. He sees it. He reads the polls numbers. He watches the news coverage. He's upset about it, so he thought he could go out there and kind of undo it. And he knew that, look, he went out and gave a 18-minute speech that had no significant new announcement whatsoever, didn't have any actual purpose, and was filled with statements that were simply not true. And you could pick out the individual ones that you have, but there was a larger point, which he says prices have come down dramatically from record high inflation when I took office to now prices are down. I mean, it's that framing is entirely untrue. I mean, the inflation rate is actually right now almost exactly where it was in January of this year.
There's also a central irony that Donald Trump is actually great at willing his own reality. And he can be very effective if he says, we've totally fixed the border. If you're not a rancher, if you're not someone living at the border, you might plausibly believe that. If you weren't a Middle East correspondent, you might think, okay, peace, we've got it. But the one area where he is encountering what, frankly, Joe Biden encountered is that you cannot will an economic reality into existence. Everybody gets a paycheck, or worse, doesn't get a paycheck, right? Doesn't have a job. Everybody goes grocery shopping for their family. Everybody is approaching the holiday season and figuring out what will be in the stockings. And it doesn't matter how much Donald Trump screams it or how much he says it. This is one of the few areas where reality collides with that often quite effective rhetoric.
Does he have control at all over the economy?
I mean, the economy.
What can he do?
To an extent, I mean, there are factors of the economy that's outside the control of every president, right? You would hear this from the previous Biden White House, too. But you can control your messaging. You can control how you can connect and resonate with voters as well. You can also control the promises you made to them. This is an issue he ran on. I remember when Donald Trump put on an apron and went to a McDonald's and framed his message, his economic message, around a populist appeal. Now you tend to hear him talk about gold in the Oval Office or putting his name on the Kennedy Center. That doesn't really match with the message that you had to the working class.
So I'm glad you mentioned the Kennedy.
There's your segue. Yeah.
Thank you very much. No, because obviously we're just learning that he's actually replacing the names or adding his name to the wall, the outside wall of the Kennedy Center. Congress hasn't approved this, of course, so it's not actually a legal change. But here's what Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokeswoman, had to say about all this. She wrote, I have just been informed that the highly respected board of the Kennedy Center, some of the most successful people from all parts of the world, have just voted unanimously to rename the Kennedy Center to the Trump-Kennedy Center because of the unbelievable work President Trump has done over the last year in saving the building, not only from the standpoint of its reconstruction, but also financially and its reputation. Then this is the big moment. Congratulations to President Donald J. Trump, and likewise, congratulations to President Kennedy, because this will be a truly great team long into the future. So I don't even know what to do with that.
I bet J.D. Vance is worried about his place in the second part of the ticket.
JFK's very charismatic.
He's very charismatic. Putin doesn't name buildings after himself. Orban doesn't name buildings after himself. This is something the only leaders in the world who do this are in places like Turkmenistan and Tajikistan. There's a tin pot dictator quality to what he's doing and how he's inflicting his insecurities on the world.
By the way, that's it. And that's the thing. And I don't think I'm going too far in saying this, that this is the week, apart from the obvious tragedies of the week, this is the week that has had a kind of a feeling of Borat-ness to it. And the reason that I'm bringing that up is because Trump has also this week rewritten or written captions for these portraits of presidents that are now hanging in the White House. And under one of the captions, under the Andrew Jackson portrait, he wrote, Jackson was unjustifiably treated unfairly by the press, but not as viciously and unfairly as President Abraham Lincoln and President Donald J. Trump would in the future be. Now, the White House staff, you all cover the White House. When he suggests doing things like this that are without, to say that it's without precedent in American history, American presidential, is understating the cause. Presidents have always respected their predecessors and always talked about it. What is going on inside the White House when he does this?
Well, first, there's a certain smallness to it, obviously. But one thing I've learned, and I learned this earlier in the administration, I was told that basically they have an unofficial rule, which is that if the president asks for something twice, they do it. And I said, well, why twice? And it's worth noting also in the first term, if the president asked for something, they would first tell him why he couldn't do it, how it was illegal, how they would resign before they would allow him to do it, how he'd get killed by the media or the voters. Now I said, why twice? And they said, well, you know, he does ask for some crazy things, but the understanding is if he asks for it for a second time, he's serious about it, and they are just going to make it happen. They are going to get those plaques and get his text and have it carved in and put it up in the White House.
Well, I look forward to filming this show at the Trump-Lincoln Memorial. It's just very, very hard to understand. Something else that's hard to understand is Susie Wiles' loyalty to the president, or let's put it this way, the president's reciprocal loyalty to Susie Wiles. Obviously, there was a Vanity Fair interview this week where she said some candid things about Trump having an alcoholic's personality and J.D. Vance having a conspiracy mentality. She is not in trouble for this. We only have a minute on this, but talk about what's going on in terms of a White House that used to have, or a president that used to have, a kind of very, very stringent standard of loyalty, and if you didn't meet it, you were out.
Right. There's this no scalps policy. There's the ways in which this White House is so much more efficient and so much more accomplished in kind of wreaking havoc in a way that doesn't feel like it's completely chaotic and completely out of control. And she's somebody who gets credit for that. And it really is kind of astonishing to see the coordinated effort that was made by everybody in the administration to praise her in the aftermath.
John, last few seconds. Why isn't she fired for that?
I mean, she's indispensable to Trump, and she does not in any way try to steer him substantively. She keeps the drama around him to a minimum and makes sure, to your point, that, look, he gets what he wants. And, you know, I mean, I thought that all the cascading defense from all the people, senior people in the White House, the last one was Trump himself. Even on that one line you mentioned, an alcoholic's personality, he defended that.
Right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank our guests for joining me, and thank you at home for watching us.